Jones muted now. Councillor Jones, I might just get you to turn your microphone off now, if you could. He's putting his headphones in. Live action commentary. I think Councillor Jones might be muted now, which is good. Great. Nala Kadich Wajak Mort, Kayan Kadak Nija Walilap Buja, where Jinang Wajak Kadijin, where Knitting Bula Ye. We acknowledge the Wajak people as the traditional owners of the greater Fremantle Walilap area and pay respects to elders past and present, and recognise that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important today. Before I begin this meeting, I'd like to make note of some people we've lost in our community. We've lost two very special people in the past month, and I want to take a moment to pay tribute to them. Both of these women were people who inspired many of us, me included, to strive on behalf of our community to lead the way, whether it came to reconciliation, social inclusion, or environmental justice. Noongar elder Dr. Margaret Corbon, whose name I use with permission from her family. Margaret was born and raised near Narrogin, and her formidable intelligence began to be nurtured at the local primary school, but only after her mother sat outside for a week demanding the headmaster to allow her children to enrol. She later secured a Country Women's Association scholarship to study business management in Perth, and after working for the Native Welfare Department, where sadly she was powerless to stop her own siblings being taken away from family, she studied nursing and went on to become a leading figure in establishing the first Aboriginal controlled health service in WA. In 2021, she was awarded an honorary doctorate from Curtin University for her contribution to Aboriginal health. Here in Freo, Margaret was a key elder on our Walilap Reconciliation Action Plan group and was one of the leading drivers for proactive action towards social justice and meaningful reconciliation action. Initially, she didn't believe we were genuine in our reconciliation journey. Once the trust was built and we listened, she then used her knitting as a way to deliver a visible reminder of reconciliation by sharing her famous beanies at our elders' meeting. While beanies might sound a bit warm and fuzzy, Margaret's intellect, wit, and tenacity meant we were never under any doubt about what she thought was the best way forward. She'll be sorely missed, and we send our heartfelt condolences to all those who will be mourning her loss. Cathy Hall. Cathy was an incredible combination of care and activism, and her influence was felt through many facets of our Fremantle community. She was hands-on, whether it was hands on a sewing machine, upcycling old fabric into boomerang bags, hands in the soil planting seedlings at Hollis Park, or her hands holding yours firmly while she told you exactly what it was that she was inspired about and wanted to see happen. What was special about Cathy was as well as being hands-on, she was heart in. There was nothing she did that wasn't filled with care and concern for the well-being of others and of the planet we share. Her enthusiasm for justice and change was borne out through collective action and through inspiring us to see the world and humanity as connected and interdependent. Perhaps it was her training as a nurse that also gave her an incredible empathy for other humans. She offered kindness, a listening ear, and always made many people feel welcomed, especially those who found themselves isolated or lonely. She was also passionate about reconciliation and supported this by building relationships with elders and leaders as members of the Walilap Reconciliation Action Plan group. Cathy was the partner of former Fremantle councillor John Strachan, who we welcome here tonight, and our hearts extend out to John and all of those who were family and were like family to Cathy. When I saw Cathy a few weeks ago, I asked her what we'd do without her wisdom and encouragement. She told me we could talk to her in the trees, that's where she'll be. As former Mayor Pettit said in a tribute to Cathy, she was willing to plant shade trees under which she knows full well she will never sit. In consultation with John, we intend to put a park bench up in Hollis Park where anyone who needs Cathy's company can sit and be with her, in spirit at least. Both of these women inspired many of us, me included, to be better and to do more. They were vibrant demonstrations of the idea of the third metric, that is, that we should measure our lives not by money or status, but by the impact we have on the world and the people around us. Their legacy of purposeful activism will live on with those of us who remember them and what they stood for. And we'll take a moment's silence now for both of these losses to our community. Thank you. Get into the agenda now. We have some apologies for tonight from some of our councillors. We have been hit a little bit by the winter illnesses. Councillors Kamada, Graham and Lorva and Lang have submitted apologies for tonight. The CEO is also absent with COVID. We have applications for leave of absence, so I'll move these together. So Councillor Groom requests a leave of absence from the 8th of September 2022 to 26th of September 2022 inclusive. So I'll move that perhaps firstly. And can I have a seconder? Councillor Archibald, all those in favour? Thank you. Councillor Lang requests a leave of absence from the 28th of July, tomorrow, to the 2nd of August. So I'll move that. And seconder, Councillor Mofflin, all those in favour? Thank you. Disclosures of interest by members. Do we have any? Councillor Sullivan, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I have an impartiality interest in FPOL 2207-4 regarding the Fremantle Oval redevelopment. It's the same interest I declared at the FPOL meeting. I am a social member of the football club as of this year, and in accordance with the Local Government Act, I will stay and participate and vote on the matter.
Thank you. Any other members of the South Fremantle Football Club? Looking around the room. Okay. I have interest in the item at the end of our agenda, C22075. It's an impartiality interest. I have some challenges in terms of the Act, in terms of what to do here. I think Councillor Sullivan may even point them out. But I will leave for that item because I have consistently throughout my term as Mayor not had anything to do with that particular issue and intend to continue that way. So I will hand over to the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Mofflin, for any issues or questions related to that particular item. Okay, we have quite a public question time. We have no responses to previous questions taken on notice. So the public question time, I'm going to run in order of the agenda. And there are a number of people here for the first agenda item and perhaps some who've just arrived. I've been given a speaking list from the community members who want to speak on this item. And I've added, obviously, people who've come in and are not on that list. If you come in and you're not on that list, feel free to, at the end of when we get to the end of that item, I'll just see if there's any others who wish to speak on the Ginger Morris item. What I would say to you is that planning committee members listened very hard to everything you had to say, and everything you have sent through has been read by elected members. So at council, we are a little bit more strict with our standing orders, so we will very much hold people to 3 minutes at a maximum. What we also do really appreciate is people who get up and say, I don't need to add anything, but I just want you to know that I'm here and I agree with the person who spoke last. So if I can implore you to kind of err on the side of brevity, it won't, I would say, if anything, it will help the meeting process to move along. We do need you to speak into the microphone for public question time. That's also because the minutes are recorded, so we can go back and check anything if we need to. So you have 3 minutes. I implore you, you don't need to use all of them. and I'll give you a bit of a wind up if we're getting close to the end of that 3 minutes. Okay, so in the order that I have on the first item, Ros Connor is the first speaker.
Good evening, councillors. My name is Ros Connor and I co-own the property at 269 South Terrace. We have done our best as a group to remove duplication and keep speakers on point for you. Under the LPSF 4 mixed zone objectives, your decision tonight needs to ensure future development within mixed-use zones is sympathetic with the desired future character of each area. The city does not have a specific strategy for the desired future character of South Fremantle, but it is covered by this, the city's strategic community plan. It's a good plan. Its vision refers to a city that is clever, inclusive, a compassionate city that cares for the well-being of people, thrives on diversity and dares to be different. The plan details the vision into 7 strategic focus areas, 27 strategic outcomes and 66 strategic objectives. The officer report for this DA under strategic implications refers to 2 objectives of just 1 strategic outcome. And these are not worded in their entirety, and the specificity of meaning has been lost. The report states increase the number of visitors to Fremantle instead of greater opportunity for businesses to attract customers. Increase the number of people working in Fremantle instead of to improve the number and range of employment opportunities. Missing altogether for this strategic outcome is the remaining objective, improve the resilience of weekday economy and maintain a strong weekend economy. More of the same does not generate resilience. Systems, even strategic systems, are not designed to work favouring only certain elements. To do so unthinkingly comes at a cost to the whole. Democracies are fragile, especially when decisions are made without full and proper consideration of all the facts and consequences. You should not make your decision out of its full context. Approving this small bar contravenes many objectives important to achieving the city's vision. For example, increase in variety of businesses and economic diversity, enhance the health and well-being of people, create an organisational culture of performance, innovation and excellence, build on Fremantle's reputation as an innovative leader. A monoculture of drinking venues meets none of the strategic objectives. The non-reference by the officer's report to other important areas of the strategic community plan leaves you as elected members short on the information required to form well-considered, holistic and sustainable decisions in support of the strategy for our city and the vision it sets for our community and South Fremantle. I urge you to be bold, empowered and innovative thought leaders and to act in support of the city's vision set out in the strategic community plan, the strategy for the desired future character of our suburb. I urge you to refuse this application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for keeping your comments under 3 minutes. Jane Hammond.
Switched on. Okay. Sorry. My name is Jane Hammond. I live at 342 South Terrace, which is opposite to Ginger Morris. Fremantle has a reputation as a drinking destination. We are awash with places to drink. In South Fremantle alone, there are 12 licensed venues, and they dominate the businesses along that 1 kilometre strip of South Terrace. It could be said that you've met your strategic objective for turning Fremantle into a destination city, but at what cost? In the last year, the number of calls to Australian drug and alcohol hotlines has tripled. Alcohol has a complex role in Australian society. Australia is regularly reported or casually referred to as having an alcohol culture, where not consuming alcohol can be viewed as being un-Australian. I'm sure you all know we have a National Alcohol Strategy 2019 to 2028. The strategy highlights a lot of points, including the following. 1 in 4 Australians drink at risky levels. Alcohol was involved in 34% of intimate partner violence incidents. Alcohol is the leading cause of drug-related death, and 25% of all frontline police officers' time is taken by alcohol-related crime. And we are familiar with this in South Fremantle because when we call for assistance there, very often the police are unable to attend because they don't have the resources. Without substantive food on offer, alcohol consumption is the focus of the proposed small bar at Ginger Morris. And just because people are paying overinflated costs for those drinks, it doesn't stop people from drinking at high risk levels. In fact, one of the demographics of high concern and known to be difficult to treat for alcohol dependency are women in their 40s to 60s. Alcoholism does not have social boundaries or stereotypes. This strategy highlights actions at local, state, and national levels to reduce and prevent harm. The first priority is to improve community safety and amenity by managing antisocial behaviour and noise. The second priority is to manage the availability.
It is actually also your 3 minutes, coincidentally, but we'll check on the microphone and see what's happening there as well. So if you, if I do that 22 times, we're going to be in trouble. So we do need to wrap up at the 3 minutes. It's amazing, I know. All right, the next person we have is Warren Limonas. Councillor Thompson has arrived at the meeting, so we'll just note that down.
My name is Warren Limonas. I reside at 10 Scott Street, South Fremantle. I'm a regular customer of many of the current pubs, bars, restaurant venues in South Fremantle. I know there are many options and never found short of looking for a seat in one of them. Expanding on my previous speaker, those 12 licensed venues are between Duro Road and Nelson Street, which is less than 1 kilometre. In these venues, there are more than 1,600 seats that I can choose from. The 2021 census states there were 3,398 persons in South Fremantle, with a proportion of people being underage for drinking and some that don't use pubs or bars. That's one licensed seat for less than 2 residents in the suburb. I'm not against the business model, but I am against the business model in this highly residential location. There are already other fit-for-purpose licensed venues available for lease. These venues would have less impact on the community and would not increase the number of licensed venues in South Fremantle. If the business model is going to work, it's going to work at one of these venues. I strongly urge you to reject this application, as my neighbours and I do not need any more to choose from. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Warren. Gil McKinlay, or Jill McKinlay, in fact, I suspect.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jill. I live at 12 Scott Street, over the back fence from Ginger Morris. And tonight I'd like to talk to you about who lives in our immediate South Fremantle community. We're a diverse mix. Some of us have lived here all our lives, and others are newly arrived. In our South Fremantle community, we have shift workers, carers, hospital workers, people with drug and alcohol issues, and some of this number are in active rehabilitation. We have people working from home, professionals working long hours through the week, elderly residents, young families, people with mental health issues, people with chronic health issues, people actively fighting cancer, and a number of people from a vulnerable section of the community. These are your constituents, the people you are elected to look after, and our diversity is a strength worth preserving. This application has imposed a great personal cost on many in our community in terms of time, cost, and other resources, and a great disquiet has been generated as a result. In the petition we submitted to Council in December, 120 signatures were from residents of Scott, Sheedy and Wardy Streets and adjoining areas of South Terrace. And we've spoken to 70% of these signatories, and they do not believe that their concerns have been heard nor addressed by the modest changes. All of these people need the quiet enjoyment of their home to rest and, in some cases, recover. Most people who signed the petition live near the proposed bar and they don't have the option of leaving the bar and returning home to another suburb or a street outside the bar's impact zone. For them, there will be no escaping the impacts on amenity such as noise, parking, and patrons' poor behaviour. These numbers are a strong statement of opposition from our community of South Fremantle regarding approval of yet another bar on South Terrace at number 271. In the city's strategic community plan, one of the objectives is to enhance the health and well-being of people who live, work, and visit Fremantle. Yet the measures of success are limited to the number of sporting facilities, parks, and gardens. Exercise is only one option of maintaining health and well-being. Enhancing health and well-being must start from the basis of preserving what people have. And for some people in our community, this is already markedly compromised. Your role as elected representatives in ensuring the amenity of our homes to rest and recover is equally important, and no number of parks and gardens can make up for the constant disruption to the amenity of our homes. I urge you to reject the application on the grounds that it detracts from your strategic objectives. Thank you.
Thank you. Ian Kerr.
Thank you, Mayor. I live at 330 South Terrace and have clear line of sight from my front balcony to Ginger Morris. 271 South Terrace is in the most densely inhabited part of South Fremantle, between Jenkin and McLaren Streets. Directly opposite is a strata property with 15 residential units. There are 53 residential social housing units in the Joe Sleeman Court complex at 275 South Terrace. The Biscuit Factory has 47 residential units, with 16 of these west and south facing towards Ginger Morris. And amongst these larger complexes are heritage single-family properties which are either directly adjacent to, behind or opposite the proposed bar. So in the immediate vicinity of Ginger Morris, there are over 130 residential properties, plus others located on adjacent streets, including Scott, Sheedy and Wardy Streets. This is about 10% of all dwellings in South Fremantle. Just one licensed bar in this area would have a profound impact on the amenity of hundreds of people's homes through increased parking and traffic congestion, poor patron behaviour, and ancillary late-night pedestrian noise. And once one such bar is approved, could council refuse others? Local Planning Scheme 4 classes a small bar as an A use in a mixed-use zone. That is, it is not permitted unless the council has exercised its discretion and has granted planning approval. In deciding whether to exercise its discretion, council should give due regard to the stated objectives for a mixed-use zone, including that development shall ensure that it is not detrimental to the amenity of adjoining owners or residential properties in the locality. Importantly, this does not only apply to owners or residential properties within the mixed-use zone, but to all residential properties in the locality. Further, the words "shall ensure" are strong and emphatic. Is it too much, I ask, that development should enhance the amenity of locality, not reduce it? As a resident of South Terrace, I urge you to endorse the Planning Committee's decision and refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Jeremy Bean. I think that microphone might have turned off, so if you press the right-hand button, perfect.
Good evening. I live in a property adjoining Ginger Morris. My concern is that any approval of this application attaches to the property rather than the applicant or the current business proposal. The liquor licence that would inevitably follow council's approval would also attach to the property long after the current proprietors and indeed all of us move on. This means that a new owner or proprietor could change the character of the venue, This worries me deeply. Those conditions of the approval do not say anything about the character of the venue or its contribution to the residential area. Essentially, it could be quite a different business, although it be still selling alcohol. What might start out as a particularly targeted clientele could easily change. That is why it's a very real threat to the character of the area. This is a relevant consideration since the deemed provisions, 67(2)(10), require consideration regarding the impact of the development on the community as a whole. The modest adjustments to that the applicants have made to the proposal do not address this concern in any way. I have 3 points. The adjustments address the premises, and we won't know the efficacy of these until after this is approved and the business is operating. The applicants cannot control the impacts away from the venue. Such impacts are, as we've heard, people talking loudly in the quiet of the night as they wait for ride shares, walk to vehicles, closing doors, and driving off. All impacts on the amenity of our homes far distant from the venue. When we moved to South Fremantle and renovated our heritage cottage with council guidance, we were more than happy to share our lives with local businesses like Ginger Morris, or the previous business, Balverk as it was, the B&B and the Busy Bee Laundry, and now the bakery even. We understood that was what mixed use meant. If we knew we'd be living on an entertainment strip next to a venue that operated well into the night, I doubt we'd have bought that property. It would still be a rundown shack. I urge you to be bold in your decision and refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Sebastian Galati.
Good evening, councillors. I'd like to remind you of what I said at the last meeting because the new proposal doesn't really address any of those concerns. I'm Sebastian Galati. My partner Brooke and I are parents of 3 young girls aged 11, 10 and 6 and our new son, Henry. We've always wanted to live in South Fremantle, a place with a strong family focus and a sense of community, a place safe for our young family. We found this in Scott Street and have been warmly welcomed by our neighbourhood. Our cul-de-sac section of Scott Street is home to 3 families with children, and there are several other families within 50 metres of the proposed development. We thought this was the place to bring up our kids, and we're concerned that this is under threat now, that commercial gain will be prioritised over the local community. That yet another venue selling alcohol should be considered more important than the community who lives here. My biggest concern is the safety of my family. I've already observed large groups of patrons roam the streets, talking loudly and invasively disturbing the peace. When such people and groups are confronted by residents, it often leads to irrational and aggressive behaviour. This is very unsafe and untenable. I've seen the rubbish they leave and the damage that they cause to vehicles and homes. Smashed glass all over the footpaths is a regular occurrence for us. This is unsafe for my kids. It's unfair that we need to clean this up. The inclusion of another small bar will compound already serious safety issues. Patrons spill into the street swearing, drinking, yelling, and with a complete disregard for pedestrians. My family on bikes, scooters, and in a pram need to navigate these groups as we walk to local venues for a meal or a coffee. This is quite confronting for my kids. In making your decision, please keep me and my family safe in South Row. Thank you.
Thank you. Patricia McQuaid.
Good evening. My husband and I live at 342 South Terrace, directly across from Ginger Morris, so we live about 20 metres away from the property. We are deeply concerned with the associated noise and other impacts of this DA on our home. While Bakery, situated across the street from us on Scott Street, operates through the night, pastry crews arrive at 4 a.m., pre-opening activities such as cleaning, setting up al fresco start at 5:30 a.m., and doors open at 6. The laundromat opens at 6 as well, and already the corner is busy with activity. By evening, commercial trading activities subside and we sink into a quiet. This diurnal cycle is largely compatible with the nearby residents, including our home. Introducing a bar will mean commercial trading activity runs from 5:30 a.m. to 10 p.m. 3 days a week until midnight twice a week. With closing activities and patrons leaving, operational activity will occur more than 17 hours, 5 days a week of 5 days of every week. This would be a significant ongoing impact for us and others living in the immediate locality. The DWOR technical report identifies numerous deficiencies, some of which particularly affect us. For example, the noise contour map does not match the levels in the outdoor noise level predictions for our property. If the front door of the proposed bar is propped open for any reason, our noise impact levels could rise from a maximum allowable of 40 decibels in the evenings to over 56 decibels. This noise would travel directly into our living spaces and bedroom due to our large glazed windows and prove untenable. Critically, there will be unmanaged noises and behaviors occurring outside the bar. Patrons entering, exiting, or standing outside at late hours, talking, laughing, smoking, staff arrivals and departures, cleaning activities, and vehicular traffic. These noises have not been modeled or assessed. The DWOR report clearly states, quote, "It is ENB's experience such events occurring after hours, even if intermittent, can result in adverse impacts." There are also types of amenity impacts which we know from firsthand. A few months ago, a man who had been drinking locally smashed our bedroom window. When my husband asked at the time why he did it, he said with intoxicated vagueness that he didn't know, he just felt an urge to punch something. And last Sunday evening, an intoxicated man walked through our closed back door into our kitchen. These two incidents could have in themselves come with a high personal risk. The decision tonight is not about this particular vision of a bar, but any small bar and its impact to our lives. I ask that council consider that unless our residential amenity can be truly and fully guaranteed, that this application not be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy Argue is the next speaker.
Jeremy Argue. I'm currently of Ray Avenue and formerly of Duro Road, South Terrace End. Councillors' planning officers recommend imposing a condition on any approval for a small bar that it shall abide by all provisions of the proposed management plan as a key means of regulating impact. We think there are serious issues with this. A planning condition needs to be measurable, workable, and enforceable. It needs to provide certainty. It needs to be capable of being monitored and not require onerous council supervision to ensure it is being enforced. It requires a leap of faith to say that adherence to all of the management plan, laudable though its intent may be, is feasible as a strong enough tool to regulate local amenity impact. The plan does not contain the hard stop mechanisms that are necessary to meet the high bar requirements of the relevant planning instruments and, importantly, to ensure no detrimental impact on surrounding amenity. For example, measures drawn from the plan, such as counting patrons using a clicker, instructing staff to park on Marine Terrace, not side streets, encouraging staff to take breaks inside the premises, third-party deliveries to occur between 9 and 5 only, conversations with contractors about waste management collection on Monday to Fridays in working hours, waste collection vehicles to park legally, likely out the front of Ginger Morris, where we should mention there are no loading zones currently or delivery bays, and seldom are regular parking bays available. Music, no heavy metal, rock, techno music with strong bass. Moving on patrons for behavioural or intoxicated reasons, where I might add they become a wider community issue which this management plan can't address. These may have good intent, but they are not readily achievable or enforceable with guaranteed compliance. The inevitable erosion of adherence to the plan over time will lead to further and ongoing reduced local amenity. The city hasn't resources to monitor and enforce the management plan efficiently or effectively in a timely manner. This will lead to issues of non-compliance and land use conflict, putting local residents in the invidious position of needing to lodge complaints and provide evidence to the city to substantiate those complaints. A management plan should be used as policy for good management of an approved use, not as a main tool to achieve compliance, to be relied on for controlling impact. The applicants need to use a management plan as the primary tool for mitigating impacts goes to the issue that this DA is in an unsuitable location, the equivalent of trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
Thank you, Jeremy. That's 3 minutes.
I respectfully submit the DA should not be approved.
Thank you. Sally Rain.
I wish to raise 3 amenity impacts. The bar is to be a non-smoking venue. Patrons must go 5 metres from the entrance to smoke. That is, use the footpath outside next door houses at 269 or 273 South Terrace. You will have seen people from licensed venues smoking in small groups outside adjacent premises. Fine if it's a closed business, but here, 5 days per week, patrons, staff will smoke outside next door houses. Not many people would be happy with that outside their home. Relocating shop to bakehouse. The wide bakehouse doors at Ginger Morris open into the courtyard, right next to the bedroom windows at 269 South Terrace, which are 70 metres from the boundary. This far away from the boundary, that's the courtyard from the bedroom windows. Customers will walk up and down the driveway to the shop, chat in the courtyard, spilling noise straight into our bedrooms. In the bedrooms, you can hear everything from the courtyard. Private noise is one thing, like a baby crying. There you go, on cue. But that's fine, but commercial noise like ongoing shop activity is different. This impact will be 4 days a week from 10 a.m, worse on Fridays to Sundays when the shop and bar will be open, overlapping for 16 hours, bringing more customers, not to mention customers who've had a glass of wine or two, to the courtyard, to the shop. What if you work nights, healthcare people, police, fire, hospitality, and needed to sleep in the day? The proposed use will heavily impact on our heritage cottage dated 1897. The council should be mindful of approving a conflicting land use in a mixed use zone. These issues should be given due regard, that is, proper, genuine and realistic regard. Multiple planning provisions refer to compatibility with and amenity impact on adjoining properties. And amenity is a matter to be considered under the Planning and Development Act. Hence, noise regulations under the EP Act are not a complete answer. And in this case, compliance with the noise regs has not been demonstrated sufficiently, and the modelling didn't even include courtyards, noise and shop use. Belated noise assessment. The officers suggest deferring, in order to approve this application, deferring further noise assessment until after development approval. This is not appropriate. What if the further assessment cannot be made compliant? Even if it can be made compliant, what modifications to the building are proposed, or the building or proposed use would be necessary? These are material unknowns. Finally, this has been going on for a long time. It's the 3rd time we've had to speak. Some more applications should be properly refused, and this is one of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Nathan Stewart.
Good evening, councillors. My name's Nathan Stewart from Row Group. We're acting on behalf of the landowners of Lot 28 South Terrace in South Fremantle, the northern neighbour to the proposed small bar. I presented at the 6th July Planning Committee meeting. Since this matter is now before full council, I will just reiterate some of the main points, but I'll do so only quickly because I did submit a written submission that was quite lengthy. So just in relation to noise quickly, this is a complex and not a straightforward consideration. Sally Rains just covered it quickly just then, but there are 2 tests that are required to be covered. The first is if the application is compliant with the assigned noise levels in the noise regulations, and the second is consideration of noise under clause 67, subclause 2N of Schedule 2, the deemed provisions under the planning legislation. These are two tests. Even if the proposal complies with one of these, it still needs to comply with the other, and council needs to be satisfied of this before determining the application. It's also necessary to consider the proposal against the zone objectives for the mixed use zone under clause 3.2.1, which reads, to ensure that development is not detrimental to the amenity of adjoining owners and residential properties in the locality. At this point, I'd like to draw your attention to the existing bedroom windows on lot 28, which I circulated a photo of in the email to councillors. These windows sit above the boundary fence in this location, and noise and light will spill from the courtyard, causing a significant impact to the occupants of this dwelling. In relation to car parking, this proposal is severely deficient of on-site car parking. The officer's report states that the proposal requires 23 bays, 1 delivery bay and 4 bicycle bays. This proposal has none. Patrons and staff will arrive by private car, which will place pressure on existing on-street parking facilities that are enjoyed by residents currently and cause noise nuisances for residents. And delivery vehicles will likely use the courtyard given the lack of current loading dock area or loading bay areas on the street, again causing noise issues for the adjoining residents. And just lastly, just to cover off on something that Sally Rain just covered quickly too, in relation to the DWER comments on the applicant's acoustic report. DWAC questioned some of the elements of the methodology used in the assumptions of preparing that report, and consequently the assessment may underestimate the noise impacts of the proposal. However, in light of this information, the City is still recommending approval, but with a further condition that requires an updated acoustic report. This condition preempts the proposal being able to comply with the noise regulations, and it's in our view that it's inappropriate for Council to approve this application with this condition. Therefore, there's no certainty that this proposal will comply with the noise regulations and therefore can't be approved. Thank you.
Thanks, Nathan. Trish Calverley. Yeah.
Whatever.
It's a good idea.
Okay. So I'm here again to speak from the heart, and a few of you have heard me before. I've lived in the development straight opposite Ginger Morris for nearly 30 years with my husband. And obviously, we've seen a lot of changes in that time, mainly good ones, as we now have a plethora of cafes, restaurants, bars, quirky shops, Ginger Morris being one, and a very good one, actually. The nightlife, the South Terrace is situated mainly north from the local and Percy Flints and south towards Truro Road. Many of those do not face residential properties. That leaves the central hub with its cafes, shops, like a community village atmosphere, and a family vibe, which is why we all live there. And according to the latest census, there are 602 children under 14 living in South Fremantle. That's a lot of families, okay? Putting a bar in this vicinity will totally destroy that laid-back feeling for the residents, especially at night, as it just isn't the right place for it with all its problems. Parking, noise, outside smokers, where will they go? We've already experienced people coming down our lane to use as a toilet, and actually, I wasn't going to put this in, but we had a bad experience of a person defecating under our carport and using a towel off my clothesline to wipe themselves. So we won't go, yep. But hey, we all know a bar is a bar and will obviously create invasive noise late at night to the detriment of the area, no matter what restrictions are placed on it. Windows, doors, etc. won't make any difference. Sound travels. And who will be there to police it, especially at closing time? No one. The staff won't want to know, busy putting out their empties and going home. And the police claim they don't have the manpower for South Rio. So I'm asking you to put yourselves in our shoes and tell me this. Would you like to have a bar suddenly open up straight across the road or right next door to your house with all the problems it will bring? I know it's a mixed-use area, but when you invest in your home, you are not anticipating a late-night venue across the road. Whatever was there before, you accept and tolerate. The people here tonight are Fremantle residents and ratepayers. We as communities elect our councillors to listen to our grievances and concerns with no matters with matters close to their home. So I'm asking you once again, right from the heart, to put yourselves in our shoes and ask you to listen to our concerns and our grievances and do the right thing by the constituents of South Fremantle and refuse this application with all its problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Trish. Tony Ryak. I may not have pronounced that correctly. Please correct me.
Good evening, councillors. My name is Anthony Reich and I live at 342 South Terrace. There are many reasons that the proposed modifications do not go far enough to protect the amenity of our homes, the residential nature of the immediate surrounding area, and the impact of the development on the community. These are all relevant considerations under the deemed provisions, the city's strategic plan, and the city's planning scheme. The types of businesses in South Fremantle are already skewed towards businesses that serve alcohol to large numbers of patrons. I contest that the proportion of businesses and the diversity of those businesses in a mixed-use zone is the only consideration. It goes to the issue of community need, which is a deemed provision and a relevant planning consideration. In this residential node, we're already awoken early in the morning, sometimes at 4 a.m. as workers start at Wild Bakery, so the inclusion of a bar opening late into the night 5 nights a week would further extend the impact on our homes. I wonder if you might consider what it would be like to go to work on a regular basis with less than 6 hours sleep at best, week in, week out. This is but one potential impact on the amenity of residents that you are deciding upon today. The DUR technical review of the acoustic report identifies many deficiencies and casts very significant doubts on compliance with the noise regulations. In fact, it strikes at the heart of the Ginger Morris defence that acoustic mitigation is sufficient to address noise impact. It also validates my ongoing concerns that the extent of the impact on my home directly opposite and only 20 to 40 metres from the proposed venue will be untenable. We, the residents, have expressed that our community is at a tipping point. The ratio of licensed seats to residents bears this point out. This is a planning issue because it highlights the need to consider what a sustainable and healthy mixed-use community means. And you as community leaders have the most important and tricky task to balance the interest of the individual with the collective, individual commercial profit with the good of the collective community. We ask that you step back and consider, is this application in the best interest of the current and future community in terms of a sustainable mixed-use vision? I do not believe that the proposed wine bar, set amongst the most densely inhabited section of South Terrace, is in the right location. Honourable Mayor, councillors, I urge you to consider a balanced view of the intent of your strategic planning and protect the present and future well-being and amenity of residents in this residential node of South Terrace. Thank you.
Thank you. The other people I have listed to speak on this, I will move to now. So Lisa Barnes.
Hi councillors, I'm Lisa Barnes and I'm co-convener of the South Fremantle Precinct. Gina is an apology tonight. She was going to come but she has a family commitment. So we are a community group with 3,800 members and we represent those who live, love and work in South Fremantle. I'm neither speaking for or against their proposal tonight, but I just wish to speak for South Fremantle. It's an increasingly popular place. Its beaches, businesses and entertainment hub is popular with locals, wannabe locals, visitors, tourists and those coming from all over Perth and beyond just to enjoy it. It's a primarily residential and family-friendly area. However, in the recent years, things have changed to it being very much an adult-centric entertainment hub. And this focus seems to be taking the front seat with new offerings to the area. South Fremantle is a beautiful place to live. It has beautiful beaches, parks, and above all, a beautiful community and heart. And this needs protecting. The council need to act to ensure that the values that brought people here in the first place are retained. The very recent growth has been a boom that has brought mostly bars and restaurants. But you know, where is the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker? The bakers obviously are very high, and the Indian restaurants are high. But we do need a bit more diversity in South Fremantle than just bars. We have had a number of issues in the past which you'll be aware of. And it's not just with bars, but with other issues. So with one small bar, residents endured 2 years of noise issues. What was happening is they were complaining to management, but the management was not passing this on to the owners, and the owners were not aware. So after 2 years, this ended up in the local government mediation, and residents are finally being heard. An issue more closely to home for me, although only metres closer, is the massage parlour fiasco that saw a massage parlour with happy endings move into a high density mixed use residential and commercial building. We had to fight 9 months to get that business shut down, and at the end of that 9 month period, the council had no option but to approve it. So, you know, there's another issue, which was the parking survey, which came out for South Fremantle, which had very little consultation with councillors in the community and was hoisted upon us. So, you know, in the recent months, South Fremantle has been a bit under siege, and we're a community that is feeling quite a bit of duress and stress at the moment. At a recent Politics in the Pub, with the hospitality focus, experts in the field concurred that new venues should ideally be talking to residents directly and finding out what their concerns are, and then being able to hopefully address those concerns prior to getting approval. It's a great idea, and you know, unfortunately, in this instance, there is probably opportunity to have done things better, because one of the things I have heard is that the residents have never been talked to or listened to in this particular situation.
Lisa, I'll have to draw you to a close.
Okay, thank you. I'm just asking that the councillor please look at the strategy for South Fremantle and what can be done, and please come and talk to us about what can happen with our community, and don't just voice things upon us again. Thank you.
Thanks. Jennifer Hudson.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Hudson, and I've lived in South Fremantle for over 20 years, running a tourism accommodation business. I want you to think about Whispers Wine Bar and Darling Darling, how an example of a small, quiet bar can be run. This proposal offers something completely different to the noisy bars and pubs that we have in South Fremantle that are attracting younger and rowdy crowds. This is going to be something sophisticated, aimed at a completely different demographic that is currently chartered for. Somewhere quiet where you can sit back and relax in gorgeous surroundings and have a quiet drink. I don't know too many people that go out drinking that drive either. You should be taking an Uber, and if you live in the community, you'll be walking there. So I don't really see what the parking issue is. I do feel that it's going to be...
It's me, gallery. Everyone listen quietly to you.
I do think that this is going to be one very special, unique bar that we should embrace and have in our community. And I feel that the people that have spoken tonight, I hear what you have to say. A lot of them, there's two people coming from one home and trying to double up on their point of view. I walk down to the beach regularly. I belong to the tennis club. I go to yoga, and I know a lot of people in the community, and I've just been speaking to people generally, asking them what they feel about this, and I haven't had one person say they wouldn't want to see this beautiful bar in South Fremantle. And if anyone had the opportunity to go to some of their pop-up cafe dinners and that they had some years ago, they were just absolutely enchanting. So I plead you all to consider this as a proposal to accept. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Alessandra Rossi.
Hi, I'm Alessandra Rossi. I live in Chester Street. I wasn't going to talk tonight, but after I hear this level of bigotry and really conservatory, I thought I really need to say that this does not represent South Fremantle. I mean, all of the people that are pro this bar are probably sleeping tightly tonight because they're thinking like, well, what's the problem? Why, what is the problem? Really, it's a small, beautiful idea, and it's not gonna change at all. It's just gonna embrace more into the community, and so yeah. So hopefully, unfortunately, the people that are pro, they're not here to support it because they didn't probably think it was necessary. I didn't think it was necessary until I'm listening to all of this. Yeah, I have no words. Anyway, good luck. Good luck.
Thanks, Ali. Okay, I don't believe we have any further speakers on the Ginger Morris item. So I'll move to other items. On FPOL 22072, we have Susan Allwood. By the way, for those people who came for the Ginger Morris item, it will be the first item debated. I'm also very cognizant people might have other things to do on Wednesday night.
Oh, I need to do Pilates to stand up. I've been sitting for so long. Hello, Council. I'm speaking about the putting in my 2 bobs worth about the development around Freo Oval. And what I'd like to do, I'd like to put my questions answered on notice, please, so I can type them up, because I've only got these notes, scribbled notes. I did this all today. Because I'm a resident in South Fremantle, well, in CBD actually, on the verge there, South and CBD, foot in both fences. And I've always been interested in what happens in Fremantle. A lot of the councillors know that. So, first of all, Fremantle Oval. I'm representing many residents and ratepayers who can't be here tonight. Oh, I forgot about that. Who would like to hear your answers. So that's why I asked for the notice. First of all, who are the driving forces behind these developments, please? And why is Council endorsing oversized boxes in our heritage precinct and ignoring our World Heritage listings in this area? What are Council's intentions? And again, who are the people behind this? 2, why is Council still going ahead with more developments within our heritage precincts while still failing to declare the full financial disclosures, a financial audit upon the new council chambers building and library and FOMO? This is our monies, and that's why I'm asking, and you're increasing our rates to cover our debts, so I'm asking for an audit. As a ratepayer, I thereby ask for a financial audit from myself and a full transparency on the last council developments, which are these 2 buildings. I know Maria's been plugging for that. Please tell me, how do I go about lodging my forms for this audit? These developments, plus the hard standing at Fisherman's Wharf, show again big white boxes. Council call this its concept plan, but your wording in council is endorsing these plans. It is premature to scare people with artist sketches of these big white boxes. In future, can council please include this description on social media, a concept plan not to scale? A little bit more. I ask council if Fremantle County Council planning embraces and ensures the inclusion of the studies of the effects of added high rises within our heritage CBD upon these. 1, the increase in temperatures in our city. 2, a study to avoid the unfortunate effects of wind tunnels, such as we have here between FOMO and the council building, which can cause, occasionally, many cyclones damaging properties. 3, and a study of the increases in our carbon footprints when these buildings are constructed of concrete. What is the council giving to offset these this carbon increase, please? 4,
Thanks.
are these studies on the effects and results of additional buildings upon our ancient sewerage and water systems? Has that been done? And of course, the ongoing problems of finding parking, which increases with development.
Susan, we're at 3 minutes. Oh, cool. Okay. Perfect
That's
timing. Thank you. If you could submit those via email, they'll be answered.
So who do I just send it to Fremantle Info
agendas and minutes, I think. So Melody's just
great.
giving you an email
Thank you
address
very
there
much.
for those to come through. Thank you very much.
And I'd like to say I did read the proposal tonight, and I like my say on the heritage and the social content of the Oval, but that's got nothing to do with the overall plans. It's just alarming to live here as a long-term resident and to see big buildings going up and our heritage threatened.
Bobby Wilson on item FPOL 22073.
I've been associated with this tip site, since 1984, and some councillors here are aware of that, like Doug and Andrew and people maybe, but Jenny's the one who got it first. Oh, she has anecdotal evidence about the tip site being chaotically dumped and uncontrollably non-supervised, and a centre of huge anecdotal evidence being the most useful way to assess it. She's, as a newspaper comment of her looking at it in the 70s, I started in 84, and it's continued. I want to say, just a minute, get it straight. There are many councillors involved in this. There are 3 parts to this question of your terminating the Epuron lease and starting a fresh look at the use of the tip site. I'd like to take it, with your tolerance, back further. I'd like to say that we have a seriously contaminated tip site, and under the contaminated sites laws, it should be capped. It should be drained around the edges. There should be 150 metres barrier between residential development and contaminated sites, so that the North Coogee housing should never have been built, and so on. And we have a complicated site because the tip site is in Fremantle, and the effect is a lot in the new housing in what's North Coogee, what used to be called South Beach Village. There's a whole new hundreds and hundreds of people with young families, a lot of them on the boundary of a very contaminated tip site. And my plea has been to consider the actual requirements. We have looked since 1984 at capping the site. We've asked the state government with tongue-in-cheek and the council, and nobody has been able to come up with funds for capping the site or draining the capping. When you cap a site, you stop the rain from running it, pushing the contamination through out into the ocean and underneath in many layers to the adjoining sites, which they are. The people on the housing are not allowed to use bores or anything because they've got contaminated water. So we have a contaminated site that has a lot of environmental effects. And it's such, and I have fought for this since 84, that it should really go into what the normal mode is when it's this badly contaminated. And that is, it should be, if you're not going to, which I suggest no one is ever going to find the funds to, after now, to cap it, then you should go into damage control, which is non-access and either vegetation, non-access vegetation, or perhaps some passive recreation. But I do not believe that the tip site is safe in any way for housing in the rest of its history. And I have watched many things.
Wrap you up because it's, well, it's quite a bit over 3 minutes. I'll have to wrap you up. Thank you.
So that's my plea. Can we not presume that you're starting off with the ability to determine an alternative usage? It is a contaminated tip site.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Mark Woodcock on FPOL item 22075. And I believe you've submitted some questions via email, Mark.
Yes, good evening, thank you. My comment tonight was that the Point Street site has been vacant for many years, and the city should defer the item and have a complete investigation into the opportunity the council has to buy back the site, as it seems to have the right to do so. If the city has an opportunity to profit from it, they should. Last week, the city increased our rates as it says it needs more funds. Then why wouldn't you take the opportunity to invest back in this site and profit from any future sale of it? It's not a good look when councillors will vote to increase rates to raise money, yet won't take the opportunity here to raise funds for the city they claim they need. There are new plans for the adjacent site. New opportunities will arise. The council needs to ensure all avenues have been investigated before signing off on a plan which seems to lack the detail of investigation. One other thing I want to ask on notice, is why at FPOL didn't the council supply more details of the buyback for consideration by council, so it could have been considered properly before the FPOL voted on it? And just in support, I do hope that the councils don't vote for the 271 development of a small bar in Fremantle. I think we definitely have enough drinking sites in the city of Fremantle. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And on the Point Street item as well, Jeff Holloway.
Evening, councillors. Jeff Holloway from Serona. I'm representing the joint venture between Point Street Partners and Serona for the acquisition of the Point Street property from SKS. And I thought it was important to mention tonight that we have been in discussions and negotiations with the council over the last couple of weeks on a deed of covenant that's referred to in this paper. I want to acknowledge that we are in agreement with that and hope to finalise that in the coming few weeks. The only other point that I wanted to raise was that there seemed to be some questions about the continuing use of that site prior to construction for car parking, and we're in agreement with the status quo. So if that helps in any decisions, both for both leases to be continued. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, I'm going to run through some other agenda items, just for elected members to let me know if they're intending to speak during items, petitions, deputations, special deputations or presentations, or elected member communication, or if it could wait to elected member communication. Yeah, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to vacate the chair to allow the Deputy Mayor to conclude public question time, because I've got a conflict related to one of the items for which there is a speaker. I think the Deputy Mayor will move quickly through petitions, deputations, special deputations and presentations while I'm out of the room, because I know that the first item of elected member communication also relates to the issue on which I have a conflict. So the Deputy Mayor will stay in the chair for those items. When I come back, we'll confirm the minutes and move into debate on the agenda. Thank you, Frank.
Okay, thank you. So our next speaker was Clint Clark.
G'day, councillors. Firstly, before my 3 minutes starts, I would like to ask if the item be brought forward not at the end of tonight, as this has been going on for about 14 months. Yeah, and it's a bit unfair to make me stay here all night when I've got a young child of 6 weeks and a 4-year-old that I've got to help my wife with.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. However, it has been brought forward as a notice of motion, which we ordinarily deal with at the end of council meetings, and we do have the other items that have come through, so we'll work through as.
Okay, before I start again, I actually reject what Hannah has just said. She is fully aware of her mother parking in my bay.
Thank you. You can speak to the item and talk to that, but we are going to start the time, and we'll go from there. Thanks, mate.
Good evening. My name is Clint Clark. I'm owner of Port Jarrah Furniture at 45 High Street, Fremantle. I'm a 21-year tenant to the City of Fremantle. I've had to go through heaven and hell to get a point proven. Election night, just before election night, I was pestering councillors, asking why is someone parking in my bay, half in my bay, 2 cars at a time, and Union Stores. I pay $214.50 a month for my bay. I've been at the City of Fremantle for 21 years, paying my rates, and I'm a local. I'm actually quite angry because I'm pissed off that I even have to come here tonight to actually stop people sponging off me and the ratepayer. Currently, it is $6,000 we're in debt from the people getting free parking at the Union Stores, and no one has done nothing about it. It is not on. If you vote this down tonight, the current motion you're going to do, that means anyone here tomorrow, you have free parking in Fremantle, because it's not fair that someone with a family member is getting free parking and parking half in my bay. I've had enough. It is time to call a spade a spade. I am sick of it. I bring my children up right and wrong. This is a joke. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of the way the City of Fremantle treats my small business. Matt Hammond has blacklisted me from marketing in Fremantle. I get no marketing either.
Clint, thanks for that, but no comments in regards to staff, mate. Okay, thank you. So that brings to the end of public question time. I'll move through the other items on the agenda. So any petitions, deputations, special deputations, presentations? No. So we'll move to elected member communication. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I am making a statement tonight in relation to the notice of motion C22075 that's before Council tonight. The subject of the current notice of motion I consider to have been appropriately dealt with as per the scenarios outlined in 1 or 2 in Walga's outline of elected members, roles and responsibilities, and I can see no objective reason for it to come before Council. I also interpret the motion as potentially contravening local government regulations, Model Code of Conduct, Schedule 1, Division 4, 20.1, specifically in the part that refers to supposed inequitable application of the law by council officers. I wish to advise Council that if the motion is seconded for debate, I will remove myself from the meeting because I cannot vote on a motion that I consider could be in breach of the regulations.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. I will call the Mayor back into the room now, and then we'll resume the agenda.
Excuse me. I'd like to say something.
Yeah.
Elected member, are we on that?
We are on elected member communication, but specifically in regards to anything related to that item that the Mayor has removed herself from the room for. So if we're not going to go into debate about the item, and that Councillor Thompson was just explaining that he wasn't going to participate in the discussion.
Yeah.
Yep. So okay.
Look, I would like to ask the chair that Mr. Clark's request is considered. We have on many times have moved a motion to the front because we have got people here that need to go and attend to their family business. And I don't see that Mr. Clark is any different from anybody else that we've given concessions to. So I would just like to know, why is it that he has to wait till the end of the meeting?
Sorry, that's a question to me? Yep. Yeah, I'm quite happy that it, as it sits in the agenda, we can look to bring it forward after we've had the significant discussion in regards to the other planning item that is also on the agenda, and then we can move it in that sense.
Are we going to do it after? You are going to move it forward.
I'll make that suggestion to the Mayor that that we do bring it forward as the second item on the agenda.
Thank you.
So yeah, I'll just ask the Mayor to return and then resume my seat.
Okie dokie. So we're going to move the confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting of council dated 20. Oh, yeah. You're right. Very important. Thank you. I didn't get out of here for that long, did I? Thank you, Councillor Pemberton, and my apologies. Oh, so
okay.
Elected member communication.
Yeah, so
I just skipped over
elected
it.
member communications. I just wanted to also just share some thoughts, particularly with the very sad loss of Kathy Hall, and I do thank the Mayor for her really eloquent comments at the start of the meeting. I guess I felt like it was really important that I said something today, because if it wasn't for Kathy, I literally would not be in this room. I would not be here. She is the one who bent my arm very strongly to run for council in the first place, and it was a really I'm so grateful. It's literally changed my life. Obviously, it's been 11 years now, and what I wanted to share with people was how she did it, and it was the essence of what she was all about. She really cared deeply and passionately about purpose and giving to the community, and she recognised that I had similar feelings myself, and she persuaded me that all too often women, particularly, do a lot of work in the community from behind the scenes and don't seek leadership positions, don't seek status, don't seek positions of privilege or power necessarily. And I was very much in that basket. And it was Kathy who said, too many strong, smart women do that and are happy to operate in the sidelines and the background and get things done that way, but they need to be at the decision-making table. And that was really a powerful statement, and it really also encaptured what I thought Kathy did so well, which was encouraging people's participation in community through empowerment. And she was always about that. It wasn't about her standing up and leading and taking accolades or anything like that. It was about collaborating and empowering others and working for the greater good. And it was ironic in many ways, because she did that behind the scenes always in so many different ways for the whole time I knew her. And so even though she didn't necessarily do what she persuaded me to do, I think she was just such an asset to this community, and it's a terrible loss to see her go way too soon. And I just wanted to remember her in this moment, and especially in this place, in this chamber, and me being in this position, because if it hadn't have been for her, that wouldn't have happened. And I will be forever grateful, and I hope that many, many others hear that message that she had so strong, which is to the value and wonderful reward that you get from giving back to community and doing it in all sorts of ways, including stepping up into challenging positions and being brave and being at the table.
Thank you, Councillor Pemberton. Other councillors, were there any other elected member communication? Great, thank you for that. So we will move on to confirmation of minutes. So I'll move and ask for a seconder for us confirming the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council 22nd of June and the special meeting of Council 20th of July. So seconded by Councillor Thompson. I'm assuming everyone's fairly happy with how those minutes were captured. So I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thanks, Councillor Jones. I've got you online there. So that's going to move us into reports and recommendations from committees, and the very first one of those is PC 22071. Councillor Jones, usually as Chair of Planning Committee, I would see if you wanted to sort of introduce this item. Given that you're online, I'm not sure that you want to do that. Nope, you're good. So just to be clear, I'm moving the committee recommendation. So that's the recommendation that's printed in your agenda. That's printed in the agenda on page 32. And so as not to be ambiguous, and so the public gallery can also understand what we're doing, it's the committee decision, which was to reaffirm the decision of the Planning Committee in December 2021 to refuse the development. So that's the recommendation that I am moving, and I'll ask for a seconder for that. Councillor Pemberton. Councillors, we'll go into debate. So who would like to speak on the item? Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Mayor. It's appropriate that I speak first, I guess. Other councillors probably who were at the committee have already had their say and might not wish to go through the entire debate again. But I did refer this matter to full council primarily because I felt that the process where we go from a recommended approval to a recommended refusal is normally something that is given advance notice of, and it wasn't in this instance. So there was no elected member conversation or submission made prior to the planning committee meeting to indicate that a refusal was something that they would be seeking. So in fairness, it is a matter that would normally, in that situation, be referred to full council, and I saw no reason to break from that tradition. I'd also say that, you know, obviously a number of elected members, particularly given the vote at planning committee, are rightfully saying, why have you put yourself out on a limb on this one? Well, there's nothing wrong ever in a councillor having a different point of view to their colleagues. That's what we're here to do, is to consider every matter as individuals and on the merits as we see them. The primary difference, I guess, is that I feel that I'm supporting our local planning scheme in everything that I've decided in terms of this matter. And for me, it's a case of making decisions from the planning scheme both in a fair and consistent manner to the scheme and to the way in which we have dealt with other matters in the past. And that, to me, is a judicial role that's very important. So as I said, I don't believe, you know, I'm really putting myself out on a limb. But looking at the matter with due regard to the strategic planning instruments that we have developed over many, many years, and most of which, in fact, all of which, have come from community input into those schemes. If we agreed with every sentiment that was expressed tonight, and we were to cast those over all of the decisions that we have made in the past, both this council and many previous councils before, in terms of virtually every non-residential development in South Terrace, in South Fremantle. We wouldn't approve any of them if the decision makers who were against this bar used the same set of principles, because almost every other licensed venue, every other cafe, every other activity that operates outside of what are, I guess, normal suburban residential considerations is actually not approvable in a sense if you were to use that logic, because they all have an impact. So the notion that we have developed a planning scheme that actually says this is not a standard suburban environment where it's just all purely residential, but we have developed through consultation a scheme that describes South Terrace, South Fremantle as a mixed-use zone. That in itself, from the community and from previous councils, is an indication that there will be mixed uses, there will be uses which are non-residential, there will be uses which have impacts. So this notion of no impact, that the right for residents to enjoy residential life without impacts from other types of activities, is of course not reflected by the scheme itself. So the dilemma that we have is the difference between having set, with the community's assistance, the strategic planning vision for that area, and then dealing with each and every specific application. And we obviously have to take into account each individual situation. And there's no doubt about that. And a lot of the conversation that's been had about this application and many other applications is very, very similar. And we often find ourselves trying to find a way through that process of mitigating impacts so that they are as low as reasonably possible, whilst also respecting the strategic vision, the strategic planning that we have for that area, which is for uses other than residential. I'd like to mention a few of those. One of them is, and it might come as a surprise to most people in this room because you wouldn't have been necessarily here at the time, but Uton in Lincoln, which is a cafe. Now, there was significant community angst expressed by people living in Silver Street and Gold Street about Uton in Lincoln as a cafe. Not dissimilar to this proposal in terms of the amount of angst that came from community at the time. And I copped a huge amount of flack from friends for approving that, because I felt that it was an appropriate use. It was the sort of use that people were looking for. It was consistent with our scheme. And we also did a huge amount of work to mitigate the impacts of that. Now, many people in this room probably go to that cafe and would be surprised that it was even a close call in terms of whether it should be approved or it shouldn't be approved. And that's just one example. And there are many other examples. And I would admit that some of them we absolutely needed to try harder in terms of mitigating the impacts. And we, if we had our time again, we would be doing that. So having learnt some of those lessons, this application has been the one that has significantly gone through the ringer in that sense. So all of the lessons that have been learnt from other applications, this one is the one that actually has gone through that process of trying to mitigate the concerns as much as possible. I'll just step back a bit too. In the development of South Fremantle, and in fact in the development of the Fremantle that we know today, I have seen a number of proposals very similar to this, including, for example, Who's Your Mama, which is probably the nearest version in terms of size that I can think of to this application. And when Who's Your Mama came through, a number of the residents who lived directly over the road and in Russell Street came to this council and wrote letters of support for that application. I did the same thing when aubergines first started on my corner. It was previously a hardware shop and then a church, and then I very much actively supported it becoming a cafe with all of the consequences of that. It's now a burger place and the like. And that it was always going to have an impact on me. But it is also one of the things that actually has achieved that strategic outcome of South Fremantle becoming that vibrant, mixed environment that we were looking for. So clearly the community has expressed that desire for diversity. The difficulty we have these days is how do we achieve that diversity? We don't have a magic wand to go out and bring in the land uses that we will all desire. I mean, for as long as I've lived in South Fremantle, people have been asking for a flower shop. Well, there is one further north in Fremantle, in Rachel's ward, but there isn't, one that specifically sells flowers down our way. We would love a patisserie. We would love the flower shop. We would love the butchers to come back. Dare I say, the candlestick maker that was referenced. Those are the sort of things, the mix of things that we would love traditionally. We would love Ginger Morris to stay. Everyone recognises it as a great shop. But what everybody also has to recognise is that a lot of those uses simply aren't sustainable in these sorts of small-scale environments, and that quite a few of them have actually had to explore ways of making themselves sustainable. And that is what this applicant has done, is to try and investigate through many different ideas, ways that they can sustain the shop that everybody likes by bringing in a new use that helps pay the bills, basically. So when people talk about diversity and how it would be great to have all of these other types of activities other than something that sells alcohol or coffee, it's the coffee and the alcohol in many of these instances that are actually keeping the other types of activities open. So, for example, the Foodland that was there right at the beginning when I moved to South Fremantle in '85 has had to diversify its offer to be able to keep serving the local community. I'd also argue that this conversation about too many booze barns and about the issue of alcohol consumption itself. Well, firstly, as I said at committee, the issue of alcohol consumption is one of those ones where, yes, we all understand and agree with the issue, but the solutions are not necessarily as clear. This notion that introducing a temperance approach to the issue is going to resolve the matter is not realistically the sort of approach that we need for the city. And what we were doing is really encouraging the sorts of venues that don't have excessive drinking as their culture, supporting the sorts of venues that offer food as part of the main deal or some other activity other than drinking, supporting smaller scale venues where the control of patrons is very much at the forefront, and in supporting places which are more sophisticated in their culture, such that they will automatically have a management style that precludes the sort of misbehaviour and the sort of excess that often went with the big booze barns. So that is the very reason why this council for about 12 years has been proactively supporting the small bar concept. But this isn't a small bar. This is a tiny bar compared to the standard small bar. It is a lot more, if you even compare it to the other venues in the area, where you have primarily small bars which are catering for younger people. This is clearly not the model that is being proposed here. It's a model that actually, as was stated by a member of the audience, is actually one that's going to cater for the kids that go to Madalena's and to Percy Flint's. This will be the types of venue that will cater for their parents who are living in South Fremantle, who want that more sophisticated, smaller venue. And to suggest that there is already too many of those sorts of venues in South Fremantle is wrong. Sure, you might be able to go to the back bar at the local on a weeknight and find that sort of ambience, but there is nowhere else in South Fremantle where you get that sort of ambience, on the weekend, for example. The notion that it's in the wrong location. Well, I don't know where the right location is. As I said previously, if you were to look at every licensed venue in South Fremantle and the proximity of residents to those licensed venues, including the restaurants, including the licensed venues that you don't even know are licensed, like the coffee roasters at the end of my street, if you were to look at each one of those and say, where's the nearest resident? Well, the nearest resident is no further away from any of those venues, typically, than it is in this instance. So if we were to be fair and to be consistent with the way in which we have dealt with all of those other venues, we would take that into account, but wouldn't use it as the primary reason for refusal. It would be a reason to try and mitigate the concerns, but not to necessarily refuse it outright without further consideration. The notion that we should have a strip development versus nodes. Again, this is the essence of our planning scheme. If our planning scheme, if our community had said, we only want this sort of development at the two pubs, then that is what our scheme would reflect. But it's not what our scheme reflects. And there's a very good reason for it. Because if we had done that and intensified around those nodes rather than let it spread out a bit, then everybody that lived right at those nodes in the side streets there would be dealing with twice as much of the parking problem, rather than spreading it out with different uses in different locations over a longer distance. And that is why the scheme is presented.
Chair, the councillor has exceeded his allotted time.
I was feeling that coming. Yes, thank you. Councillors, did others wish to speak on this item? Councillor Pemberton.
Yes, I haven't spoken on this because I haven't actually been part of the planning committee since it's been coming to us, and I guess also just for the gallery's information and clarity around this from some of the comments that were made. We're not actually the decision makers in this. It is actually a SAT decision now. We just give them a recommendation of what the council position is. Notwithstanding some of the very valid comments Councillor Sutherland has just made, I am not going to support this. I do think it is too much for this location. And I guess I feel in some ways, maybe it's partly my role as City Ward Councillor, who knows, but my concern is about the proliferation and spread of commercial activities into residential neighbourhoods in general, and how that actually sucks the activity out of the Fremantle CBD. South Fremantle has actually been competing quite heavily with the CBD, and what we're seeing is inner city places struggling to survive while places, down the road are doing really well and causing a lot of amenity impact on the residents down there. I'm very fortunate to live within walking distance to Fremantle, slightly in the other direction, and have recently started to hear loud music from a pub or something, some kind of venue closely, which has never occurred in my 20 years of living there. And it's quite distressing. So I kind of understand in that sense when you move into what has always been a residential area. I've lived there in the neighbourhood since 1984. To then be woken up, kept awake by nightlife activity and so on, and going, hang on, I chose not to live in the centre of Fremantle. Why am I being subjected to this and so on? So I guess I have empathy about the people who feel the impacts or are concerned about the potential impacts of this proposal. I also do think it's a bigger picture kind of issue for me, where I think, you know, the nodes along South Terrace in South Fremantle are quite lovely, but I don't know that we want to turn that into like Lygon Street or something. And again, you know, sucking activity out of the CBD, which we're trying to draw activity into, it seems sort of counterproductive to our strategic objectives as a council. I think, you know, having a small neighbourhood bar and various kind of local businesses and amenity is really great, but I do think that we need to, and our job as councillors is to bring in that discretion and local kind of knowledge and opinion, I guess, around how much is too much, how far do we go with this? And I do feel like we do need to limit it to some degree in these traditional residential neighbourhoods. I also think there are real serious concerns around the literal kind of amenity impact of this particular proposal, and don't necessarily feel, I think that the shortened hours that have been proposed are a massive improvement, and I can see why officers have made a recommendation for approval, and note that the recommendation is on balance, so even they were not 100% committed to this, because the reduced hours make it almost acceptable, but to me they still don't make it acceptable, and I would rather that we allow the current nodes in South Fremantle to continue to kind of flourish and try and manage them as best we can, but we don't want to actually just have a green light on anybody who wants to open a nightlife activity in our residential areas, whether it's mixed use or not. Noting that, you know, this is a use that needs a discretion to be applied in order to be approved. I also think that we need to think really carefully about what particular combination of mixed-use activities are in these various nodes, or, you know, adjacent to lots of neighbours, as well as how close residential properties actually are. And noting that, you know, while, you know, when you've got a bakery on one side and a bar on the other side, then, you know, you're potentially going to have, as some residents have said, you're going to have noise from 4 or 5 in the morning through to midnight, or, you know, 1 a.m. when they empty the bins and lock up and go home. And to me, that is completely unacceptable. That is just really not fair. You know, if you're in the CBD of Fremantle, okay, you come into that environment knowing that's what it is. But in our suburban neighbourhoods and little hubs within those kind of mixed-use kind of areas within communities, I think we need to be cautious about that, and that's why I'm not going to support it.
Thanks, Councillor Pemberton. Councillor Vusic.
Thank you. I think Councillor Pemberton has covered a lot of important points. What I'd like to add is that if you have a look at Melbourne's small bar and how they handle it, small bars in Melbourne are, you know, 40, 50, 60 is considered a large bar. They have a different culture. That is really a small bar culture. They pay double the price for drinks. And when you compare the term tiny bar to the Ginger Morris application, it's all at 80 or 90 capacity. It's almost like a saloon. So I see it as a small bar. I see it, all of the points are being amply covered by all of the communities that have come here this evening. You know, we've covered the parking, the noise, the mental health issues, and antisocial behaviour and so forth. It's the wrong location. There is merit in the application, and I would certainly acknowledge that. This is a square peg. You know, it's been said that you can't put a square peg in a round hole. Well, actually, you can. That's if you use a hammer. You can hammer it in. Now, this evening, we've got the challenge before us is to be reasonable. We've heard the arguments on both sides, and to make a balanced decision. I don't intend to be a hammer this evening because I think that the location is wrong, no matter how, you know, whatever the opposite side of the argument is. So I won't be supporting this this application.
Thanks, Councillor Groom.
Yep, thanks for the opportunity. This is one that I have kind of come very close to the line on, and I'd like to think it could work, but unlike Councillor Sullivan, I don't find the planning scheme gives us a black and white position that says every application for non-residential use has to be approved in a mixed-use area, because our mixed-use area very clearly describes the fact that in considering these other uses, we need to consider the residential impact. And I have kind of looked up and down this street, and there are no other hospitality uses that are as close to and as surrounded by residential uses in the context of detached housing. So I fully accept that there are hospitality type uses in some of the mixed use developments on a site. So we've got apartments above restaurants and the like, but this one is quite unique in a standalone building surrounded by standalone housing, and as someone pointed out, about 2 feet away from some of those windows. So when I kind of look at all the uncertainties about noise and the additional information that we received this week from our colleagues at DWER demonstrate that those questions about the noise report are live and by no means resolved by the applicant's information. I just find that I can't satisfy myself that the impact on residential areas is satisfactorily managed. And I do come back to the idea that we're not approving the lovely bar that the applicant will no doubt operate, and the clientele that applicant will seek to use. We are approving a bar use, and who owns and operates that bar in the future is by no means a certainty or a condition of the planning approval. So as much as I would like to approve it and would probably like to have a drink at this bar, I don't believe it's the right use in the right place.
Thank you, Councillor Groom. Councillor Archibald, I think. Yes.
Thank you. Yes, look, I concur with my colleagues on either side of me. I do think that I do agree that the application is probably quite an interesting one, and I do concur that it isn't really one of those tiny bars. To me, it's just the wrong location. Given what the public have said, and in particular, I just felt the issue is not even how they control the noise of the venue; it's what happens on the streets, and that is something that's just so hard to control. And I just wanted to mention that, you know, like a lot of alcohol venues were approved, particularly like during the 90s and the zeros and whatnot. But for 20 years, and it started in the 90s, we set up the Fremantle Accord, which was to look at how to manage alcohol problems, which really were alcohol problems on the street. And that was around, I don't think it's working now, but it was still going, yeah. So, and it was at the initiative of the WA Police, who are at wit's end trying to work out how to manage the alcohol venues, particularly across the city. So I think the more that these operations can be kept to fairly, you know, reasonable. I mean, one thing the police really liked was keeping them in fairly nodes, you know, so that way the management of them was a much more practical thing. So, yeah, I think we have to be very careful about mixed use. It is a discretion, as was already said, and I feel that on balance, and I agree it's a difficult balancing act in this one, but I think on balance I could not support the application. Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Archibald. Councillor Moughlin.
Sorry. Thank you. And yeah, I suppose just to add, like I would really also like to be able to support the application, but for me there is too much uncertainty in regards to the understanding of the noise impacts. I'm not too concerned about the street-based impacts, but considering that there are residential properties, you know, if we are talking 2 feet away from the venue, I find it would be extremely difficult to manage, noting that the applicant did come back with significant improvements and work on the site. It still feels like it wouldn't be one that would achieve an acceptable outcome.
Councillor Jones, Wondering if you'd like to speak?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
We can, thanks.
Yeah. I just want to raise a part of the discussion that's kind of been missed so far, and that is that this is the council's response to a mediation offer from the applicant. And although I don't support the bar, I think it's important that people making the decision understand what the decision is, and the people from the public understand that too. So the applicants have come forward with a mediated offer, which in their view reduces the impact on the neighbours. If we accept that offer, and this is the view that the planning staff have taken, if we accept that offer, those modifications become part of the planning application and are therefore enforceable under planning law, is my understanding, because they are part of the application. If we refuse the mediation, it then goes to SAT, back to SAT, and those conditions don't apply, and SAT could make any decision they wish, which for the residents could be a worse decision. And I think we need to be very clear about that. So there is a judgment to be made by elected members. Do we accept the mediation, which would presumably then be accepted by SAT, and then the kind of ameliorations in the proposal are enshrined in the proposal, or do we let it go to SAT? SAT could approve the original proposal with no conditions at all. Probably wouldn't, but they could. So I think think people just need to be mindful of that. It's not a simple matter of deciding that we're voting against this bar. The bar, there's every likelihood, in my view, that SAT will approve this for the reasons Councillor Sullivan has explained. So whether it's approved with or without conditions is really an issue we need to take very carefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. And I'm just going to follow your statement with a clarification from the Manager of Statutory Planning, standing in for the Director of Planning. Is your microphone working? The right-hand button. Nope, not working. Let's get you another microphone. Thanks, Chloe.
Through the chair, to clarify, the decision that council makes tonight is in effect a reconsidered decision. So the applicant will have the option of either accepting the decision with all its conditions, or whether it's a refusal and I guess dropping the appeal, or they move on to the next step, which is likely a full hearing with SAT. So SAT will then look at the proposal in its entirety, in whichever form the applicant chooses. So it might well be the originally lodged application. SAT will effectively then become the decision maker and look at every factor in the case. There'll be expert witnesses and the likes reviewing it all. So if an approval is given tonight, the applicant can choose to accept that and withdraw their appeal. If it's a refusal or a reaffirmation of the existing refusal, the applicant can then proceed to the full hearing, and the conditions, if there is an approval issued by SAT, the conditions would be at the discretion of the member.
Councillors, I'm just wondering if everyone's clear on what we've just heard, or whether they need further clarification. Councillor Pemberton.
Can I ask a question around, is it worth therefore potentially adding a second note item, whatever, advice note or something to SAT, which is should SAT determine that this application can be approved, we would prefer this current round with these current conditions? Is there any way of communicating that, or is that going to undermine our position totally?
Procedurally, if you could give us some advice on that.
Yes, through the chair. I think what would happen is that when it proceeds to a full hearing, if that so happens, a package of all the documents would go to SAT for their consideration. Part of that would be council's minutes, so that would be communicated. The SAT member would be able to take that point of view under consideration, as they would all the submissions from the people in the community.
Right, so I suspect we may be drafting up an amendment, and given the time frame on this, we'll need to do that tonight rather than refer this off anywhere else. So if there's a member who's, it sounds like Councillor Pemberton, you'd be happy to move an amendment along the lines of that wording? Yep.
No, she can't, Madam Chair, because she's already spoken.
Councillor Thompson, would you like to pursue this line of thinking, or other councillors who haven't spoken?
I think I'm it, Madam Chair. If we get a suitable form of words and I can hear those form of words, I'm happy to move it.
Yep. So while we're working that up, perhaps we could have a little conference between various people to get those words going. Councillor Archibald.
The question really is, do we need an amendment or can we just add a note?
Yeah, okay,
because
good.
A note might be more appropriate.
There's democracy in action. It's good watching.
I just feel a note, which still goes with the minutes, but it doesn't undermine the integrity of the position that the council may take.
Let's get officers to draft something up that we'll have a quick look at as a note and get their advice on whether it can be a note or needs to be an amendment. We need hold music. Okay, so the advice is that a note will be fine. So if we maybe just, do we still need to move that as an amendment? We do. Yep, so it's an advice note, so we'll need to move that. Councillor Thompson, when he sees some words, which I'm sure we'll get up shortly, you can consider if you were of a mind to move that. That's just going to come up on screen shortly. We've just flicked it from one side of the room to the other using the magic of technology. And Councillor Thompson, if you want to have a look at that and let us know if you would like to move that. Otherwise, I'm happy to. Yep. Move that second. And the number of patrons. All right, Councillor Thompson, are you happy for this to include the number of patrons and the hours and noise controls? Can't do that in a note. Yeah. Okay, we're getting that written. Maybe we'll move into debate on the amendment and get a seconder on the basis that we'll include those. So, Councillor Pemberton, you're happy to second that? Okay, so on the amendment to add the advice note, Councillor Moughlin.
Yeah, sorry, just to add, maybe it's just simply to put the modified application rather than going into detail.
Chloe, you heard that? So the suggestion is we just put the modified application. Yeah.
Cool. Yes, it would be the proposal as submitted through mediation.
Okay.
Would be the best way to describe, because that is what we were considering.
Good. Thank you. Wordsmithing by committee is hard work but effective. Thank you. Great. Okay, so Councillor Thompson, Councillor Pemberton, you're happy with that wording, the proposal as It's nearly up there. Right. Is it this? Smaller proposal dated. Councillor Sullivan, it sounded like the words that you had established were somewhat different to that. Does that have the same effect? This is very much what we do in
Given that
committee.
they've put a date in, that would be specifically related to the stamped documents that were submitted on that date. So I think that would be sufficient to accurately describe what's been suggested.
Okay, so mover and seconder are happy with those
Can
words on that basis?
Can I just say,
on the words,
further? With all due respect, if we go off with this to add this, we're assuming that the people who will be adjudicating this at SAT, it isn't a foregone conclusion. I think that they're going to be, competent, balanced people who are going to look at this application, and I have confidence in that. I think this weakens the position. Why we've gone through this whole process.
So I'm going to say that we've moved into debate of the amendment from now. So Councillor Vucic's spoken. Other people to speak on the amendment? Councillor Jones, jump in if you want to speak on the amendment. You're happy? All right, so we'll put the amendment to a vote. So we're putting what's up on the screen at the moment as an amendment to add this advice note to a vote. All those in favour of adding the advice note? So that's Councillors Jones, Thompson, Groom, Archibald, Pemberton, Sullivan, Moughlin, and myself. And against is Councillor Vucic. Okay, so the amendment is carried. So we're going to move back to the item now as amended with the note. Any further debate on the item as amended? Perhaps I'll just then speak, I guess, from my 2 cents. I've really struggled with this one. Many years ago, I was involved in a campaign called Goodbye Dullsville, which was all about moving away from the beer barn model of, what we were experiencing in Perth to encourage exactly this kind of small bar. I feel like what we're talking about is the straw that's breaking the camel's back, because there is a whole lot of other activity going on in the area, and it is having consequences, whether it's 20 metres from your front door or 800 metres. And it feels a little to me like this straw is getting a lot of the weight of a particular decision, when in fact it's probably the straw we all want. It's the bar that we would all choose to go to, just not near our house. So I'm really line ball on this. I think influenced by also the greater need for us to look at this area. So we are hearing you, South Fremantle. We do know there's challenges with the people drinking and the impacts and the difficulty getting an Uber and all of those things and what that's causing. I think this alone, were it coming into the neighbourhood without those other impacts being in place, would probably be welcomed. I do struggle, and I think Councillor Groom's articulated very well the struggle I have just with the direct vicinity and some of the noise modelling, and that didn't, I guess I was reading that next noise report thinking, please say this fixes it, and it just didn't say that for me, and I'm really struggling with that. Certainly, I think if the SAT considers this, we want them to consider the smaller proposal, the one that we've seen in the lead up to this council meeting. So I think the amendment's taking us in the right direction. I would note, though, and I think Councillor Jones has articulated this very well, we're not the decision makers here, and there's any likelihood that on the sort of the scheme and the other things that takes into consideration, that the bar will gain approval from SAT. So we can make the noises we want to make as a council. I think the work we need to do moving forward is in the revision of the strategic community plan that we have coming up this year, have a big conversation about what do we want? Do we want nodes? Do we want mixed use precincts? What is it that we actually see these areas operating as? Because, you know, South Terrace, I think we've all known for a long time that that is a high activity zone, but what do we want it to be in the future? I am literally deciding how I'm going to vote pretty much on the spot. I suspect I'm going to cast a vote that may aggravate some people, but I do it in the sense that I think this is actually something we want. Maybe, you know, the rest of the impacts are the things that are leading us to a problem with supporting it, and that's a piece of work that I commit to doing through the strategic community plan with the community. So we'll go to a vote. So we're voting for, hang on. So I've moved the committee recommendation, which is to reaffirm. Yeah, the advice note is an addition to the officer's recommendation. Somebody tell me. To the committee? Yeah, good, okay. So I'm kind of looking what's on the screen and thinking, I don't know. Yeah, so we will just be very clear that if you're voting yes, you are reaffirming the committee recommendation for refusal, but with the advice note added. All good? So all those in favour? So councillors Moughlin in favour to refuse. It's like a tautology. Councillor Jones, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Groom, Archibald, Pemberton, and Vusick. Yep. And those against. So Councillor Sullivan and myself. So, yep, sure. Yeah, I might just, I was going to go to the officer to just give an understanding to the gallery about what the next steps are.
Thank you, Chair. The next steps will be ultimately up to the applicant as to how they choose to proceed, firstly. They may choose to withdraw their appeal and leave it at that. If they do seek to proceed, it is likely a full hearing will be convened. That will happen in a couple of months' time. I don't think it'll be an ultra-quick process. There are opportunities for people to write to SAT and apply to intervene. It is very rare that neighbours or submitters are permitted to do that, but they are welcome to contact SAT to find out a little bit more about that. The hearing itself is open to the public, so when that is scheduled, it will be on the SAT website. But like I said, it hasn't gotten to that point yet, and it is a long way off. The actual proceedings themselves will be between the applicant and the respondent being the city, and any representatives on either part.
Thank you. I hope that makes things clear for the people in the gallery. You're very welcome to stay, but we also understand if you may not want to. So I've had a request for some items, and as per usual, what we do is people who are in the gallery for an item, we will bring your items to the earliest part of the meeting. So I can see we've got Bobby Wilson here for the FPOL 22073. Susan's here. Yep, I'm just trying to see through the crowd. Susan's here for FPOL. Yeah, and he's online. Yep. Yep. So Susan and Mark Woodcock is here for the Point Street one. So I'm happy to do this in consultation with the Deputy Mayor, who was chairing while I was out of the room, but my sense would be that we move through those items and then the C item for which there's someone in the gallery as well. Yep, comfortable with that? Okay. Just wait for the party outside to subside. Thank you. It's a lovely place for a public meeting, but a little loud for us. So we'll move to FPOL 22073, South Fremantle landfill site. I'll move that, and the seconder for that, Councillor Pemberton. Was there any debate on the matter? Councillors? Nope. So support the officer's recommendation. Councillor Busey?
Can I just, what I'd like to say is that it's really good to see Bobby Wilson here tonight. If there is an expert and an authority on the former South Fremantle tip, and that's Bobby. She's paid her dues to this particular environmental issue that's still within her own community. And I think perhaps what we might consider is an amendment, perhaps to the officer's recommendation, where we might consider including Bobby's words in terms of it being a deeply contaminated site. And, you know, the other thing that has occurred to me also since we last talked about this is we have spent so much money on this site in consultation. So I think there is room for an amendment in the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Vusic, as you know, we do need to give notice of amendments. This has been to committee, so there was quite an opportunity between committee and now to draft up an amendment. And I think given that we don't have the specific words here, it's going to be a little bit difficult to include that now, or even to determine whether it's a minor amendment or not.
Well, you had no difficulty determining that for the previous item.
Yeah, I think you'd appreciate that we're on a deadline for the SAT and we don't have the opportunity to defer or refer the previous item. And that was a minor amendment for which I think we had fairly clear wording. Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just point out that in part 3, where it talks about alternative uses, I mean, just bear in mind that that's a terminology that includes vegetation, open space, any of those matters. It can include cap and cover and vegetation. So that it really is just the beginning of recognising that we need to put a line under the proposed solar farm because it's dead. And we also need to acknowledge that it is a severely contaminated site. We've done that through the massive volumes of reports that I dropped into the councillors' lounge recently for you all to read. And we need to find a way of dealing with that. We can't just do nothing. And that's what item 3, part 3 is basically saying is we now need to look to the future as to what we're going to do. It doesn't rule out anything, and it doesn't rule in a particular approach either.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thompson. Your microphone's popped off for some reason.
Just to accommodate the concerns mentioned previously by Councillor Vujic, we could just simply do a minor amendment and put the word contaminated in front of the South Fremantle landfill site in both recommendation 2 and 3.
Okay, let me just get some advice on that specific as a amendment. Okay, so I was just checking if we think there's any legal implications or otherwise for using that word in there, but it sounds like we're fairly comfortable with that. So I'm happy for that to be a specific minor amendment. Yep. Councillor Thompson, is that what you're proposing? Okay, remove the word former and replace it with contaminated. Councillor Vusic, would you be seconding that on the basis that, yep, good. All right. popping those words in there. On the minor amendment, any further discussion? All right, I'll put that minor amendment to a vote. All those in favour? That looks, all those in favour, just keep your hands up for a minute for me. Councillor Jones, Thompson, Groom, Archibald, Pemberton, Vusick, Sullivan, Fitzharding. All those against. Councillor Moughlin against, and Councillor Jones, which way did you just vote? I'm now confused. For. Councillor Jones, I'm counting you as for unless I hear anything different. It was just a bit of a time lag. Thanks. And yeah, I voted for. Yep. Back to the item as amended. Any further debate? Okay, so we can go on to a vote. All those in favour? Okay, that looks to be unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Fremantle Oval redevelopment. I'll move the officer's recommendation. A seconder for that. Councillor Archibald. And I'll note some proposed amendments by Councillor Sullivan. Don't know, maybe we want to speak on the item and then go to the amendments, or maybe go straight into the amendments. I feel like the amendments probably detail anything that we will have in the conversation anyway, because they're quite thorough. So, Councillor Sullivan, did you want to move those?
Yes, thanks.
And a seconder, Councillor Thompson.
Look, the amendment is self-explanatory. At FPOL, I did indicate that I would be seeking some additional dot points to go in. The first half of those, I think, were drafted by Russell Kingdom and sent to me. So I modified a few of them a little bit, but included the second half probably from about E onwards, because they were the matters that I spoke to at length at FPOL that I didn't seem to get a lot of objection to. So that's been brought forward in this proposal. Happy to consider any variation to any of those dot points that were circulated. And so if there are, I'll deal with those in closing.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. On the amendment, any further speakers? Councillor Thompson.
Oh, just to support the amendment, Madam Chair, I think Councillor Sullivan made a very eloquent speech at FPOL and made a very convincing argument to put these into the recommendations, so I'm happy to support them.
Okay. I'll just put an issue on the table that we may want to consider alongside the amendments, and because there's a few councillors who aren't here tonight, I haven't progressed this as an amendment, but the CEO is keen to form a working group to look at the more detailed application of this particular proposal, recognising this is just a business plan. I do think the operational model is something that working group may also want to consider. And while Councillor Sullivan's amendments don't speak specifically to that, I think we will need another item to form that working group so that people have an opportunity to nominate for it. So I guess just to flag that I would see this would form potentially the terms of reference plus possibly some of the operational aspects for an ongoing working group with councillors and stakeholders represented. Yep. Anything further on the amendments? Nope. All those in favour? Amendments? Yep, that looks to be unanimous. Back to the item as amended. I just want to speak very briefly on this item and why it's important. I think people, have been happy but mystified with the amount of energy and effort that we've been putting into attracting international sporting events and things like that to Fremantle. Why do we do that? It's for a number of reasons. One is it brings a lot of international visitation. It brings a lot of international media. It earns us a whole lot of international exposure. But the other thing it does is it builds the case for Fremantle to be a key location for major sporting events. And it builds the case for effectively the next steps of this business plan, which is to go out and do the advocacy work that we need to turn Fremantle Oval into the world-class venue it can be. The feedback we've had from all of the clubs who've played there, and certainly from the Waffle Grand Final, and certainly from the punters, is that they love coming to games at Fremantle Oval. but the facilities are out of date. The beautiful heritage stand is completely divorced from the oval itself. South Fremantle Football Club's assets are definitely ageing. And there's a huge opportunity to also open up that space as a thoroughfare through which people and the public can embrace that area as a community asset. So the business plan lays the foundations for us to go out and do the hard work now of convincing funding partners that they want to come to this party. That's going to be the state government, that's going to be the federal government, it may well even be the AFL, because there is that need for the next tier facility in Western Australia. I think recently you would have seen Optus have said we're not doing waffle ground finals anymore. That's a massive opportunity for Fremantle to bring people in, to fill up the businesses, to expose people to a Fremantle that they haven't seen for a while, and to keep our shops open and hopefully encourage new ones to come into the area. So just for a bit of context and I guess to understand the next steps, the working group to look at the detailed design and the operational aspects, but part of my job and anyone from Fremantle or from council who's speaking to people who can make these decisions is to go out there and advocate for this project to receive state and federal funding. So I will put the amended item to a vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. I can just see Councillor Jones's thumb. That gives me enough. We'll go on that. Okay. I'll move the officer's recommendation for Point Street. Poll item 2207.5. Seconder for that, Councillor Moughlin. I note that Councillor Busick has a proposed amendment on the item before we move to the amendment. Councillor Groom.
Yeah, so as not a member of FPOL, I didn't get to participate in the debate, and unfortunately, I think it would have been useful to have heard it, so I should have turned up that day. Look, on the surface, this deal looks like kind of a dud for the city, and I get why people are asking questions. Why don't we just buy it back? Why don't we look into this more? And certainly I have asked that questions of the CEO and others during the week, and really had to try and satisfy myself that this makes sense for the city and is not another case of kind of a lost opportunity. I think it's really important to recognise that we sold this site 9 years ago. So 9 years ago, 9 years of benefit from that $10 million, which is other projects that have happened and, interest that wasn't paid and et cetera, et cetera. So it's not like it's just kind of turned over and suddenly, it's being sold for more. I think it's really important to understand that 9 years ago means that whoever bought it has incurred costs on that land, holding charges, I don't know their finance arrangements, and they've spent a lot of money to get a DA, and it's not cheap for that kind of proposal. Also, I was working in the development sector at that time, and all the indications that they were genuinely intending to develop a hotel on the site, and that Hilton were genuinely intending to bring that product to Fremantle. So I think it's really important for us to acknowledge that in 9 years, lots of things have changed in the market. Lots of things have changed in our thinking about what could happen for the city and what's the best use of that site. We're now in a position where that proponent has kind of proposed a sale to another operator in the market with the DA. So there is value that they are handing on for that site to the new buyer. They're also able to negotiate on land sales in the private sector in ways that council simply aren't. And I am so frustrated by how we are strung up when we try to deal on land, and that impacts the value we can get for land because of the processes we need to go through and the way we need to caveat the land. So I think the final thing that consideration for me was that given what the current owner has spent on the land in terms of getting a DA, if we tried to exercise our buyback clause, which was simply put in there to make sure someone didn't buy the land, do absolutely nothing, and then flog it when the market got better, they may certainly challenge the validity of that clause given the investment that's been made in the land. So kind of all of that unpacking of where we're at and what's being proposed, and also acknowledging that we really want something to happen on that land. We don't want to buy the land back with money we don't have, to then go through a stupid government tender process to try and sell the land again and, you know, no doubt not get a good deal because of all the constraints we need to put on that deal. It doesn't make any sense to me that we would tie ourselves up in that process and that debt and that proceeding, even though when you just look at this transaction on a very superficial surface level, that kind of looks like what should be done. So does it pass the front page test or the pub test? Maybe not without some knowledge, but I've really kind of satisfied and convinced myself that in terms of getting an outcome on the land, which is ultimately what we want, an outcome for the city, more people living in the city, it is in our best interest to allow this transaction to proceed and not try to exercise rights and open up a whole lot of uncertainties and risks that could just delay things.
Thanks, Councillor Groom. It sounds like that might be a bit of a segue into Councillor V6 amendment, if she wants to move it. Or alternative, sorry. Oh, hang on. No, so we're debating this recommendation. Sorry. The officer's recommendation. So what it means is that if the officer's recommendation were to fail, you would then be able to move your alternative recommendation. So councillors, so you understand that you're voting for the officer's recommendation, it takes the alternative off the table. Councillors on the item?
Look, as I said in F poll, if we were given more information, if we were given options and alternatives that were researched and given with some financials, I could certainly have a look at that and say, well, this is the best out of a rotten lot. I just have a real problem with how we get ourselves into these spaces, and I have a real problem that the ratepayer is going to miss out here. I don't think there's anything to stop us from taking a pause, having a look at those options with some depth and some financials alongside them. I have said during the budget, only of last week, that we didn't spend not even an hour as a collective intellectual group of people on how we can grow income-producing assets. Because if we don't, and if we keep losing them at this rate, what are we passing on to the next generation? That's what really concerns me. So, as much as this is really easy, the deal's done. You know, I feel like I'm a rubber stamp, and I don't like to be in that position. So I can't support it. I really can't, and I can't face the ratepayers and say, well, gosh, we you know, here's the Spicer incident all over again. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I support everything that Councillor Groom has said and more. As one of the councillors that, you know, I guess has been on board since we sold, knowing full well the reasons that we went through of trying to amalgamate that site in the first instance over a reasonable period of time, and then make it offered for redevelopment. The current owner did everything they could do to try and bring that development to fruition, and I have no doubt about that, because they bought 3 properties all at the same time, one of which was ours, and they've developed the other 2, and they developed them extremely well. So it was the right deal to do at the time. It's just unfortunate that the market and you know, basically changed, and there wasn't the need for the types of developments that they were proposing to do. The second thing I would say is that a couple of years after we sold it, when we were starting to realise that things perhaps weren't going to go as perfectly as we had envisaged, the possibility of a buyback clause, of implementing the buyback clause, was certainly something that was being discussed. And obviously it would have been discussed confidentially at the time, but it's so long ago now, I don't think it's unreasonable to suggest that we were worried that we were going to have to buy back the property at a price that was actually the price we sold it at, but not what the value of the land was, because it had gone down, not up. And at the point where we made that decision to extend for the current owner the opportunity to look at other options, I think we basically forewent our option to buy it back. We basically said, look, the buyback option was there to get you to get over the line within a reasonable period of time. Obviously, 9 years now is not a reasonable period of time. We wanted the development to occur before then, but the reality is it wouldn't have made sense to buy it back then. The reality for us right now, and I have to say this absolutely plainly, we can't afford to buy it back right now. So why anybody in this chamber thinks that it is an option for us to actually go and do that is beyond me. The notion that we would spend money that is sitting there as part of cash flow to buy back a property at $10 million or more and actually end up with a cash flow that's not sustainable is just not a responsible option for us to even consider. So spending in 6 months, a year, however long you want, to consider an option which would be a financially disastrous decision for us to make is just not something that I want to entertain for 6 months or a year or 2 years. We need to look forward, and we need to take the opportunity for a new developer to come forward with some of the matters carried forward, and we need to work with them to try and get a development up and running as quickly as we can. This is the best way to get to that end game. And like 9 years ago, that's the strategic approach that we should be taking. So for me, I get why some people might want more time to understand all of that, but we don't really have an opportunity for more time, because that will just potentially either take this offer off the table and we might not see it again, or it'll simply delay the time it takes to get to the strategic end game that this council needs for that site.
Thanks, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Jones, I think I can see that you have your hand up online. But I can't hear you yet. Keep talking.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there you are. Thanks.
I don't know if Mr. Hammond can answer this question on the spot, but it would seem to me if there's a buyback option built into the terms of the sale, I can't imagine the buyback option would say that if the owners decide to get rid of the site, the council can ignore them for 6 months. And I don't know if Mr. Hammond can answer that, but it would seem there would be something like 60 days, 90 days, 30 days or something that the council had to choose whether to exercise its buyback option. I can't imagine it would be 6 months. And obviously, Mr. Hammond may not be able to answer that on the spot tonight, but I think that for me is sufficient reason to think this is not a great amendment. The other thing I'd say is that I think maybe the manager of development assessments may know better than me, but I can remember at least 2 very, very comprehensive development applications for the site, plus huge amounts of money spent on attempts to dewater the site. So I think there's no doubt at all that the applicants were very, very serious in their intention to try and do something on this site. And it's obviously failed. They've built, as far as I know, 3 other hotels in Western Australia during the same time period, and we unfortunately came fourth.
I think we can confirm there have been a number of DAs and work undertaken on site, and we'll take the other part of this, I think, more as a comment, because I'm not sure that we can answer that. In answer to a sort of question about what the legal situation would be, i.e. would we end up in a fight were we to go down the path of trying to take back the land or buy back the land, I think the sense was that that was a possibility, yeah. So, Councillor Archibald?
Thank you. Yes, I fully support the resolution as came through from the FPOL committee for all the reasons that Councillor Groom has just mentioned and also that we discussed in committee. I do agree with the sentiment that we need to be, very careful with how we look at opportunities for growing our income, how we look at opportunities for maximising how our city grows. But in reality, if this site does see a development, it will certainly benefit our community. So in more ways than one, both from rates revenue, but from use and activating that area. We don't, as a council, have resources to do those kinds of things, and it's not really our core business. So I feel that by carrying on with this, it's an appropriate way to go. But I think certainly we should be investing time in looking at how we can optimise our position as a council in the future. So I do support the application, the motion as put to us from FPOL. Thank you.
Councillor Moughlin.
Geez, that was dangerous. Yeah, I suppose I definitely support the motion as put by officers, or sorry, the recommendation from officers and through committee. And Councillor Sullivan spoke to one point that this, and Councillor Groom did as well, that this property was sold 10 years ago, and it was sold with the intent to have it developed, and that intent hasn't changed, and it hasn't been our land for 10 years. It's not our land at the moment. It's still owned by someone else, and there is an opportunity to realise the intent of that sale, which is to have that land developed and to most probably realise a better outcome now than what was intended initially with a hotel development. But if we're able to gain a residential development out of this, that's going to be a far better outcome for the long-term sustainability of Fremantle, both from a vibrancy and a financial perspective. So fully supportive of supporting the officer's recommendation.
All right. At risk of reiterating some points, are any other councillors going to speak?
I think I may as well.
Yeah, go on.
Madam Chair, look, if another property came on the market for $10 million, we wouldn't buy it anyway. So
very good. I tend to agree with the position that's been put. I mean, look, we had 3 budget meetings looking at revenue generation through our operating assets. At no point did we see that we needed to increase the amount of parking bays in the city because the current parking is not full. So we do use this site. This site is used for parking. We do get some revenue from this site at the moment in parking, but the sustainable long-term revenue generation outcome, which is our overarching strategic imperative, is to increase the number of ratepayers living in Fremantle, and that's exactly what we're trying to do through this. So I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation. Should we put that one to the vote? All those in favour of the officer's recommendation? Everyone apart from Councillor Vusic, and against? Councillor Vusic and Councillor Vusic against. Cool. Okay, that brings us to the end of matters for which I believe there are people in the public gallery, apart from the C item. So I'm going to vacate the chair. I'm going to hand it over to Councillor Moughlin to chair that one, and I'll wait to be called back in. Thank you.
Okay, excuse me. So motions of which previous notice has been given. We've got item C 2207-5, elected member motion from Councillor Vusic. Would you like to move your motion, Councillor? Okay, do we have a seconder for that motion? Okay, being there's no seconder for that motion, then that lapses. And to advise
Why am I not surprised?
and then we move on. Thank you.
All right, elected members, I'm going to go through the remainder of the agenda and ask you to call out any items on which you wish to speak. So going back to the PC items, 22077, local planning policy, anyone? Nope. 22078, local heritage survey, heritage list. Yep, Councillor Pemberton. Going to FPOL 22076, budget amendments. Nope. The C items, C22071, CEO performance review report. Councillors Vusic and Mofflin. Okay. Yep. Councillor, sorry, Vusic, you wanted to speak to C22072? Yep. How about the 3 and 4 items? Anyone? No. Okay, I'm going to move PC 22077, FPOL 22076, C item 22073 and C item 22074 on block. Can I have a seconder for that? Councillor Archibald, all those in favour? That's unanimous. Got a bit done there. That brings us PC 22078, so I'll move the officer's recommendation and ask for a seconder on that one. Councillor Groom. Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you. Look, I'm not going to speak at length. I'm glad that the officer's report did make some mention of the qualities of value or character related to the 1960s adaptation of this building, because that's to me where the value lies in the Queen Street property, J-Lou Flats. You know, I do 100% agree that there is no heritage merit left in the 4 townhouses that were built in 1897. But to me, the 1960s kind of element of it has always been a bit special. And, you know, noting, as I sent around in the email, the reference that John Alberti made when selling it to use the term iconic building. And so I just ask that we can vote on the 2 properties separately, please.
Certainly can. Just need to pull that up. Anyone else on that item? I feel like, yeah, J-Lou Flats, it's correct but sad, because I kind of love the aesthetic of that building, and it feels like it represents a building typology and an affordable sort of building that we're not seeing as much of in the city. So, page around someone. 34. Sorry. Thank you. Getting there. All right. So we'll move these as 2 separate items. If there's no further debate, I'll move 61 to 69 Knutsford Street. All those in favour? And against? Councillor Vusic against. And then I'll move J-Lou Flats, 34 Queen Street. All those in favour? I'm kind of in favour, but sad. Councillor Jones, bring your hand on screen if it is voting. Yep. And so that's Councillors Thompson, Archibald, Fitzharding and Mofflin. And against Councillors Groom, Pemberton, Sullivan, Vusic and Jones. So First one's carried, second one's lost. There you go. Interesting path forward on that one, I suspect. Okay. Agendas and minutes, we're all good? Okay, good. Okay, so that takes us to C item 22071. I'll move the officer's recommendation, seconded by Councillor Moughlin, who's chair of that committee. Over to you.
Thank you. I just want to speak briefly to the CEO performance review process, and in the first instance, acknowledge the feedback that elected members and staff provided as part of that process. And it was an interesting one to work through, particularly noting that the CEO, or rather our CEO, was acting for a long period of time during the year, but was most probably adjudged as the CEO nonetheless for that period of time. I'm really happy that we have a strong, robust process where people were able to provide their feedback and a rating and a ranking as part of that process. And I think it was a fair evaluation of the performance of the CEO during that period of time. The conversations that have subsequently occurred and contributed to the development of the KPIs for this financial year, I would like to say it's great that the first ordinary council meeting of July, we're looking to adopt those KPIs so that the CEO is clear about the expectations for the year. And I would just implore elected members to support those KPIs and contribute to the conversation with the CEO around their performance during the year. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Moughlin, and thanks for your work on that committee. Councillors, further discussion on that? Councillor Vusic.
Could we have separate voting on it, please?
Certainly could. Yep. Was there one in particular you wanted to pull out? Two. Okay, so we can put 1 and 3 together. I guess I'm just echoing Councillor Moughlin's comments. I think it is a report worth reading because it did survey a number of staff, and it wasn't just us having a think about it. It was actually based on some fairly robust engagement with the organisation, and on that basis, I think we're moving forward confidently into this next year. So it's good work. All right, so I will move 1 and 3 of the officer's recommendation. All those in favour? That looks to be unanimous. And I'll move part 2 of the officer's recommendation. All those in favour? Everyone apart from Councillor Vusic and against? Councillor Vusic against. All right. That item. Monthly financial report C22072, noting the additional comment from officers in the additional documents. I will move that, and seconded by Councillor Archibald. Councillor Vusic, you had some comment on this, I think?
Yes, I do. The additional documents provided late today was really interesting because the total project cost for the Civic Centre is $62,532,320. So after 18 months, we've come to a level of transparency that the ratepayers are owed. It's over 62 million. This is not including the amounts that are budgeted for 22-23. I just like that noted.
Well, there is no mechanism by which we can note that, but it's something you've said out loud. So
I guess what I'm assuming now that we'll reset our figures, and so that we don't have to have this monthly conversation. Our own documents have done this.
Yeah. I understand officers are preparing a report, and I'm happy to take input from officers here that splits out the costs of the business plan, the Civic Centre, and any other associated works approved under other council decisions. the figures that you're using in here are conflating a number of those different issues. So perhaps we can get an indication from officers on what that report will include and when we can expect to see it, based on Councillor Kamada's motion, I think, of a previous meeting.
Thank you. Through the chair. So officers are now compiling a report that pulls together both the construction costs of the Wallylup Civic Centre, which we've been reporting to Audit and Risk for the last 12 months, plus all the project costs associated with the King Square business case and associated projects as well. That will be submitted to the August Audit and Risk Committee and then subsequently on to Council.
Thank you.
Can I just say, what am I missing here? The figures are very clear here. You've presented them.
I'm not going to get into a debate with officers, but I would encourage you to come to Audit and Risk next Audit and Risk meeting, because this is going to be presented as an item to that Audit and Risk Committee as per Councillor Kamada's motion. All right. Closing debate on that item. Any further elected members wish to speak? All right. We'll put that one to a vote. All those in favour? And Councillor Jones, yep, I can see your hand, so that's unanimous. Thank you. That is going to, if I haven't missed anything, have I missed anything? Agendas and minutes. Are we good? We're good. There's no urgent business. There are no late items. There is no confidential business. So I will close the meeting at 8:55 p.m.